Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately titled IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and you can find more about IPA USA and IPA World by visiting our website at ipausa.org. And up in that top right-hand corner, you can friend us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. You can, and I don't know if I've got all these terms right, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can be a friend on our Facebook page. And magically, every Monday, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. All the Porch Play Chats are being turned into podcasts, and so you can subscribe to Spotify for free, and you'll be able to start seeing the lineup of Porch Play Chats. We've been doing these for 4 years, I think. There's over 200 of them, and each one of them is unique and filled with important information. So I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA, and with me on the porch is Stacy Benge. Hi, Stacy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We're so glad you're here. Stacy is an early childhood speaker who approaches learning in the early years with practicality and common sense, standing firm on the truth that children learn best through simple, authentic experiences. She advocates for child-led play to build solid foundations for child development. Stacy is the author of the book, The Whole Child Alphabet: How Young Children Actually Develop Literacy, and it's published by Exchange Press. And boy, Stacy's going to talk to us today about child-led big body play and how that is helping their development. So Stacy, this is a fabulous topic.
Oh, good. It's a big one too.
It is. I think so many people are afraid of big body play because they're afraid kids are going to get hurt.
Yes, yeah.
That talking about the benefits of it is going to be helpful.
Yes, yeah. And my passion is looking at what development will support future literacy. And, and I kind of want to preface it with, what I think when we talk about literacy for children birth to 5, that our mindset needs to be not a matter of teaching, but a matter of development. What needs to develop to support children, in the future in literacy. And I think when we understand that, that helps us really defend play, and specifically child-led play, because children are very intuitive, and their brains tell their bodies what they need, and then their bodies and actions tell us. So if we hold space for that child-led play and let children move as they see fit, that's just so beneficial to their physical development. And so looking specifically at big body play and big body movements, I like to connect that to handwriting and like kind of understanding, before children can write, before we can, and I'm talking about specifically formal handwriting,
right.
Not the writing composition where we see letters drawn on paper. I'm talking about the actual holding the pen or pencil, doing, the dot-to-dot tracing worksheet. Well, that is not a matter of just us putting a pencil in a child's hand and telling them to hold it a certain way. Their body has to be developed to support that. And that development, it's a whole body thing. And so that development begins really and truly on the playground, and those big body movements. And so if we look at how we develop physically, we develop top down, middle out. So that's kind of that neck and torso being developed and stabilized. So then, and then the development kind of goes down into the abs and the hips and the knees and stuff. But looking at the middle out, that neck and torso needs to be developed and stabilized to support the shoulders. Well, the shoulders then need to be stabilized to support the elbows. The elbows support the wrist supports the hands, and the hands, support the fingers. And then we even have like separation of hand and fine motor strength. But for our hands to hold that pencil, it comes all the way back up to our neck and our torsos being stabilized. So it's a concept of mobility on stability. So if we're moving something, so if we're moving, our hands and we're writing, well, that mobility depends on the arm being stabilized, which depends on that neck and torso. So how does all that develop? Children climbing outside, climbing trees, climbing up slides, climbing on playground equipment, that moving and running around. And then also, in addition to just this, it's called cephalocaudal proximal distal, this top down, middle out. In addition to that, our bodies also have to develop our internal senses, which is our vestibular sense and our sense of proprioception. Well, that vestibular sense is our sense of balance. Well, how does that tie into handwriting? That's what keeps your hand steady when you're writing. If we see children going up and down off the line, it could be their vestibular system not being fully developed. That's what keeps our heads and our eyes steady. The proprioception is the amount of pressure that we put on a pen or pencil when we're holding it, and the amount of pressure that we put on the paper as we're writing. Well, our bodies have to develop that vestibular and that proprioceptive sense. Well, those develop by being challenged and children moving around. So that's that spinning and hanging upside down that we see a lot of. And so I think when we open up this space for children to, again, move their bodies as they see fit, as their brain saying, I need to climb higher and higher, we need to spin faster and faster, it's really the brain telling the child, we've got to have this movement to develop these senses, to develop these skills, to help support what's going to be happening later on down the line. So all this to be said, handwriting is a big body experience, and we've got to open that space up to let children move to develop it.
And what I hear you saying is that sometimes I think, oh, don't climb up the slide, you slide down the slide, right? Mm-hmm. But if children are, I always said when a toddler is climbing on something, they need to climb. And so you need to find something that's okay for them to climb on, right? You need to listen to what the child's body is telling you. If, the toddler, I know my toddler teachers would go, oh my God, they're toddler on and off and on and off. And I would start laughing. And I said, they're telling you what their body needs. So you give them something that they can move like that, or they're telling you they want to play in water. And so if we took that and incorporated that kind of thinking to every age of child, what is that child's body telling me they need to do? Then we wouldn't have this issue with development not happening. So children need to be outside running and jumping and climbing and what do we say, oh no, it's too hot to go outside. Well, it might be too hot for you, but if licensing says you can go outside.
Exactly.
And you're going to be miserable inside because they're going to need to move, and then it's going to create trouble. So how can a teacher recognize, let's say a child isn't, you have those children that are sort of, I call them the pinball kids. They kind of, they bump up against a person over here. They bump up against a person over here. And some people say, watch where you're going and be really careful. Is there a developmental thing other than they need that input? They need that pressure input. Is there something else that could be going on when they seem kind of?
Well, and I think like what you just said, kind of that pressure, and granted, I'm not an OT, but from what I have learned through experiences with my children doing occupational therapy, and I have a niece who's an OT, is a lot of times, again, when you see children doing something, they're seeking something, or sometimes they're avoiding something. So a lot of times if they are going back and forth, or you have the child who leans up against the wall, a lot of times they might be seeking that proprioceptive, that pressure input. Yes. Which, I mean, their brain is seeking that, and that's helping the brain develop this sense of, okay, when I push against the wall, I'm feeling this pressure coming back. And if I push harder, I feel more pressure coming back, or less, or whatever it may be. And it could also be the vestibular system as well, wanting to move and develop. And it could be also the child saying, I need to get outside and move a lot more. I'm contained right here and I'm doing what I'm allowed to do, but I actually need more of this movement, more of this action.
So, and so that, I think it's 5 great examples, right, of how instead of saying, oh, the child shouldn't be doing that, or he's bumping into his friends, or why is he climbing on that chair when I've told him 100 times that his feet belong on the floor? You need to stop looking at it as a behavior thing and start examining what that child's body is needing, and then find a way to fulfill that. And so I think that it's like we're shifting from what the child is doing to what the child needs.
Exactly.
And if we did that across every developmental domain, we'd be in great shape. And so
Oh
would the
yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny. It's like, when we, like I said, we shift that focus from what do we teach and what, but what needs to develop. And when we start looking through that, what do the children need? And a lot of times what they need, well, majority of the time what they need is that child-led play. They need us to back off and open the space up for them to take control and do, them fulfill their missions that they have and what it is that they want to do and they need. And, and you've mentioned too, like when children, kind of keep doing things, like the toddler keeps climbing or the child keeps walking around with the bucket and dumping and filling.
Yeah.
That repetition is important to the developmental process as well. And so I think us allowing the child to repeat those actions, and that's another great thing that child-led play allows, is for that repetition, because it's not just a one and done. It's no, I've got to keep exploring this, or I've got to keep building this muscle, or I'm still trying to figure this out. And I think when we stop that child-led repetition, we're really stifling a lot of the development, a lot of the learning, and a lot of the needs that the children have.
And so as one of the things that, I'm going back to the toddler room because I love toddlers, but one of the things that teachers would be so frustrated with is, I'm going to just take all the manipulatives off the shelf because they're dumping. And I said, yeah, I know that's what toddlers do. That's what their bodies are telling them they need to do. So where can you redirect them to a place that's okay for them to dump and fill? Or the toddlers that were throwing things, because they that muscle work. And so they're throwing things. Now they might be throwing blocks. So, okay, so how can you redirect them?
Exactly.
Something else that may have that same pressure, because sometimes it's the pressure that they need, but sometimes it's just the mechanics of throwing. So, we had in the toddler room, we had we had 3 manipulatives on the shelf for 10 toddlers, but they had lots of manipulatives in them. So if they dumped them, we only had 3 buckets that were dumped, not 6. So that's one of the ways that we worked through it. But then they had lots of other things to do where they could put things in and take things out, right? But we also had an area with a bucket, just a pail that you use to cart water around. And the bucket was over against the wall, and it had a whole basket of big fluffy puff balls that they could throw to their heart's content, trying to get them in the bucket. You would not believe how many, the attention to task and just that one thing that teachers provided for them because they needed to throw. And then outside we had little balls that they could throw harder, but without that were still spongy, but they could get that a little more weight than a puffball inside. All of those things, the child's body is telling you what they need.
Yeah. And I love looking and like analyzing why are they walking around with the bucket full and dumping it? Like, what is their body developing? Well, first of all, that proprioception we were just talking about, and think of the brain making the connections. Okay, my bucket is full. This is heavy. I need this much more strength to walk over. But when I dump it out, it's lighter. I don't need as much strength. And it's like we feel like that's where I think we forget sometimes that's something that has to develop. That's when we go to the refrigerator and we pull the gallon of milk out, and we know based on how much milk in there, how much strength we need to do that. Well, we weren't born with that. It had to develop, and it developed through those early experiences. And then just that spatial relationships of roaming around, that going back to that, the neck and torso stability and the wrist stability. And, there's a lot being developed by toddlers repetitively walking around, filling things up and dumping, which connects to, and again, I my thing's to connect it all to literacy, connecting to that handwriting, think of all those skills that are being developed through that simple experience, but we'll support them eventually when the time comes for them to hold the pencil and do a dot-to-dot worksheet.
Right, which we hope they never have to do, but
exactly, or unless they're like 8 years old. Yeah. And let me
never.
clarify, when I'm talking, like, I'm a huge advocate that I really don't think a pen or pencil should be in a child's hand for formal instruction till like age 6 or 7. Which I know is way against the grain, but if we look developmentally, that really is when their body is ready to support that task.
Well, and I think that it goes back to that pressure that we feel of getting them ready. And what I'd love you, the people who are listening, what I'd love you to consider is not getting them ready in the way you think they need to be ready, but following what the child tells you they're ready for, right? So if a child is over and at the art table and they say, Miss Debbie, how do I spell my name? Then, they're interested in their name. They might be 4 and they're interested. I would, get a crayon and go, this is how you spell your name, right? With capital and lowercase. But that doesn't mean I expect the child to learn how to spell their name. That's just they're showing interest, right? So it's and maybe they're going to start making the letters that are the pre-literacy letters and symbols that come with development. But that doesn't mean you're going to say, oh, let me get a pencil and let's put the pencil and you have to hold it this way. That's not what their body's telling you, right?
Exactly.
So I think sometimes we misread it, hoping that they're ready for something that we think we need to check off our list when that's not what their body's telling you.
Exactly. And one of the things I talk about in my book is we're talking really about kind of 2 separate skill sets. So when the child is asking about letters, or you see letters start to emerge on their paper, that is showing, like you said, the interest and connection. And it's showing that they're starting to realize that letters are can carry meaning at some point, and we use them to convey a message. But we don't expect them to start spelling at that point. But we know that that's starting to emerge. Well, just because they're doing that does not mean that their body is ready for that dot-to-dot worksheet. These are 2 different skill sets. They do come together at some point, but not yet. We have these 2 different things, these 2 different things happening. One of the things that I do in a lot of my trainings to kind of really, hone in on the point of children not being ready for those dot-to-dot worksheets is I have the participants put their pencil in their non-dominant hand. And then I have them write a series of things. And I'm like, what is your body doing? Of course, the handwriting always looks a little wonky, but I'm like, what is your body doing? And they start realizing I'm pulling a shoulder. I'm doing a death grip on the pen. I'm doing something weird with my neck. And what I always say is, I gave you a task that you're not ready for, but you compensated with your body. Your non-dominant side typically is not designed to do this task, but your body's telling me I'm compensating, I'm doing it, but it's not correct. It's not how I should be using my arm and my hand. And I'm like, that's the same thing we do if we give children those formal, writing worksheets too early, and we see them, death gripping the pen, pulling their shoulder, pulling their elbow. They're compensating to do the task that we've given them, but their body's telling us, I'm not ready for this yet.
I'm not ready for that.
And that usually hits home when I do that that little activity.
That's a real good visual cue too for teachers to see when they may be asking children to trace the letter of the week or do any of those things. Since I teach college courses in early childhood, and I probably have said this before on a different Porch Play Chat, but I'm going to say it one more time because it's a lesson because I think we go directly to letters when we hear literacy. It's letters. It's only letters. So it was, oh my goodness. And so I was noticing this with my college students that we would talk about flannel stories and writing down children's stories as they were dictating them to us. If they had a story that they wanted to tell us, and that so that they could connect the spoken word with the written word. But and we would go through all these amazing literacy activities in class that they would do hands-on and say, oh, this was so much fun, and oh, I really like this. And then we'd go through the learning standards, and fortunately in Pennsylvania we have good ones, and I would have them go through break them into groups and have them go through just the literacy and language section, which was probably 10 full pages of different things. And I would ask them to find all of the standards that mentioned letters as they were going through. And then at the end, they would go, I'm not finding any. And I said, I know. I know you're not, right? They, one of them said, well, this one says they may start to recognize some of the letters in their name. I said, yes, but is that writing letters?
Right.
No. They may be able to distinguish between a numeral and a letter, but is that writing letters? No.
Yeah.
And then after we'd done that, and they said, no, there's really no standard in these 15 pages that talk about anything with children writing letters. Then they would do their literacy or language activity, and it would all be letters.
Oh.
And the next day, I would come back in and say, what just happened?
Yeah.
We did all this stuff on Tuesday.
Yeah. What disconnected there?
There were no standards that had anything to do with letters. And you agreed that, and then I got your play experiences, and they're all letters.
Yeah.
So then we talked about it, and they were like, and I said, so you can tell me, and you can verbalize, articulate, describe, but you're not able to apply it. Why is that? And that became a really, really deep conversation that they recognized that they knew, based on all of our activities and experiences in the classroom, that pre-K kids, it was not developmentally appropriate to make them trace letters or do anything, right? But then when it came to application, they went straight to what had been done to them. And so that's where we were able to sort of have their aha moment, that you're just repeating what you experienced instead of internalizing what you were learning. And this is the problem, right? Because you're doing what was done to you instead of what you're learning. So you have to always question yourself.
Yeah.
Is this what they made me do? Or is this something that is appropriate for this particular age or this particular child? And so I think going back to, it's really hard. I mean, people can tell me everything about why play is important, and then they're not applying that in their classroom because they're doing what was done to them. So it's this internal conflict that I think every educator has in trying to determine, is this why I'm doing this, or am I doing it because this is what is age appropriate or effective for this age group? So yikes, it's a huge dilemma. And I think we get on this hamster wheel and we don't reflect enough. And so that's what I'm hoping people are hearing. Are you doing it
Yeah,
because it's done to you? Or are you doing it because it's the right thing and what the child's body is telling you they're ready for?
right, exactly. And that's what when we follow, the children's cues. And I think sometimes when we say that, we think we're talking about, okay, which, what they're interested in, what they want to learn about, but it's also their cues of their actions. If we're sitting at group time, it's too long and they're fidgeting, they're telling you ready to get up and move around, or it can be again watching what they're repeating over and over. There's a reason that they're doing that. There's a need. And so that's us following their cues, and they're telling us developmentally what it is they need, what their body is saying. I need this movement, I need to climb, I need to carry this around. And
Mhm.
I think that's us watching them, and like you said, kind of breaking some of those. You kind of go with what you know, but kind of breaking from that and then actually following what the child's telling us.
And providing those opportunities. I'm going to go back one more thing, and then you can close this out. But Bruce Perry, that neuroscientist and child psychiatrist who worked with tons of children who were either horribly neglected or horribly traumatized, sometimes once, sometimes multiple times, described what the learning cycle was. And I have changed his word to from the learning cycle to the development cycle, right? Because it is truly what he's describing is development. That before children can before children can do anything in a classroom, they have to feel safe, right? They have
Yes.
to feel like they're a valued member of the community, that they belong there. And then once that happens, then they become curious. And then that curiosity leads to them exploring their environment and making discoveries. And when they discover things, they get pleasure from it. Oh, look, I put this together. Oh, look, I was able to do this. And when they had pleasure from it, then they repeat it, which is how they develop mastery. And after they've developed mastery, they feel confident and competent that they've achieved something. And then that builds their self-concept, which then makes them feel good about who they are and makes them curious. And here we go
Yeah.
again, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it's this cycle of development that we should be really honing in on
Mm-hmm.
instead of what we think they're ready for. They'll tell you what they're ready for.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to observe it. And you can only do that when they're playing. So
Exactly. And so that cycle, you're talking about them feeling safe. As that cycle's going on, they're going to feel, if they are feeling safe and then they're feeling confident, they're going to start taking things a little bit further, a little bit,
yeah,
and that's where, and I always say that children dive deeper than, if children are doing something that's on their own accord and it's intrinsically motivated and something they want to do or learn about, that they're more persistent to the task. They tend to dive deeper than like we could imagine. And I just feel like they take it a little bit further, but it's us again providing that space and opportunity to do it.
time and space. Every
Mm-hmm.
child needs time and space and a safe place and a teacher who loves them. Um,
Exactly.
and so I think all of those are wonderful lessons for us to take into the fall and to really question ourselves on, why am I doing this? Because this is what the child's body tells me they're ready for, or because what I feel like they should be ready for.
Yeah.
This was wonderful. Stacy, thank you so much. Any closing
Thank
thoughts?
you.
Oh, good.
I feel like we kind of, packed a lot into that, to that time period. But yeah, just encourage your kids to get out and move. And then, like I said, I feel like when we can look at the child's play activity, and, and I feel like all play supports literacy, whether it's labeled literacy or not. But when we can look and explain what's developing in the child while the child is seeking that movement, that motion, that activity, and we can explain it and verbalize it, I think that helps us really and truly defend child-led play.
Yeah.
For all, everybody has their idea of what should be going on in early childhood, but we can show no, child-led play is essential, it's needed, and here's all the development that's taking place.
That's taking place. And just think what you could do for families in a documentation panel about what a child is doing on the playground and what they're developing and what skills will help them in the future. That will help parents recognize that you're valuable and what you're doing is valuable. Oh, amazing. Okay, don't go anywhere. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.